Good evening and welcome to ABCL's 2024 Black History Portrait Banner Unveiling Ceremony. My name is Jonathan Suber and I'm the president of the Association of Black Citizens of Lexington. What we choose to remember and how we remember can influence the lives of individuals and communities. The Black History Project of Lexington is a manifestation of ABCL's mission to increase the recognition of the history of Black people in Lexington. I'm happy to see so many of you tonight here celebrating Black culture in its many facets. Our members, including the volunteers to research, honor, and publicize Black history in Lexington from colonial times to the present, are happy to see you as well. Throughout our nation's history, the nature of citizenship and belonging has changed, even as Black people fought for and built this nation and gained fuller participation in our nation's political, economic, and cultural life. The question of belonging still lingers. And that's why we have asked Mason Ayala to share the poem I Too by Langston Hughes. Mason, please come forward.
I Too by Langston Hughes. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America.
Thank you, Mason. And now, Sean Osborne, ABCL's founding president and historian, will introduce us to this year's banner honorees.
So before I start, once again for Mason. So it's great to see so many of you here, and as I was mentioning before we started, how shocking it was to see so many of you RSVP. So to you, thank you. Those of you who are planners understand. So it is really good to see so many of you here celebrating these two banner honorees. We started off with 24, we added 3 last year, we added 2 more this year, and I think that you'll really enjoy the stories of Kate and John the same way you did the ones we brought in last year. We brought back some new people to present, and we have someone that you may know from her time in Lexington as well. So let me sort of go through our people here. These folks represent a myriad of facets of the Black experience from the 1700s to the present. And one of the things that I want you to think about as you hear these stories tonight is, who do you resonate with? With whom do you resonate? Who are the folks that make you go, ah, because that's how this list continues to grow. Martin Kilson was a, where's my husband? Email, and Marion was right. Kate Barbadoes was the mother of one of my favorite people of Lexington, Isaac Barbadoes. John Henry Brown came from 3 different people who did not know that the others had talked about it. Marion Kilson gave me some research that she'd done years ago that included John Henry Brown. Margaret Michelet, also some information on him as well. As we continue this conversation about who's on the list, who's not on the list, who's like that person, you know, we see a fine engineer in the room. Hello, Mr. Kerr. Who, you know, when you look at, you know, some people we've identified in the past, he too could have been on there. And that's the idea. Who are the folks living and who have passed, who inspire you to think about Black excellence? So with that, I'll invite Martha Eversley to come and talk about Kate Barbadoes.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, everyone. I am honored to be here to introduce you to Kate Barbadoes. Kate and her husband Kwok joined the Lexington Church as married couples on July 19, 1754. They appear to have been enslaved at that time. Earlier that year, on February 13, 1754, Moses Barbadoes, a free-born Black man of Lexington, married Phoebe Bannister of Concord. Some of you may be wondering why the church recognized the marriage of enslaved people as well as free tax-paying people. Well, in 1705, Massachusetts became the first New England colony to pass a law against miscegenation. Try and say that. The mixing of races, an act for the better preventing of a spurious and mixed issue, prohibited intermarriage and fornication between white people and non-white people. This act also legalized marriage between enslaved men and women, free Black people, mixed race people, and Native people. This act made it more difficult for enslavers to break up enslaved spouses. On November 16, 1755, Kate and Kwok's children, Isaac and Mary, were also baptized in the First Parish Church. By July 11, 1756, when their third child, Abel, was baptized, Kwok and Kate had acquired their freedom and taken the surnames Barbadoes. They likely took the name of their birthplace. Many of the enslaved Black people who arrived in New England were born in the Americas, namely the West Indies. Potential enslavers would seek out Creole children because they were fluent in English, could more easily understand commands, and were familiar with Anglo-American society and British imperial networks. According to historian Jared Ross Hardesty, all of these factors made Creole children a lucrative investment. As many of you may know, slavery in the Caribbean, especially in Barbados, was horrific. The average enslaved person in Barbados lived 5 to 7 years after arrival. Their deaths were mainly due to malnutrition, disease, and overwork in the cane fields. The death rate far outpaced the birth rate. Dr. Hardesty notes in his book, Black Lives, Native Lands, White Worlds, A History of Slavery in New England, that between 1708 and 1735, the island of Barbados received 85,000 enslaved people. Yet the slave population as a whole only increased by 4,000 during those same years. A young child, say around the age of 8, would bring a good profit for a New England merchant after being ripped away from family and community in Barbados. So when we meet Kate in the 1750s historical records, we can imagine that she had a deep appreciation for family and a similarly deep understanding of the abuse characteristic of slavery in New England. Kate's husband, Kwok Barbadoes, died on May 5th, 1757. It is noted in Lexington Record of Births, Marriages, and Deaths, Kwok had been enslaved by Mr. Simmons. Nothing more is noted. Cape Barbados, a freed widow with 3 children under the age of 5, perseveres so that her children can hopefully thrive. We can imagine that she uses the stories she heard from her African-born parents to sustain herself and her family. She used the knowledge of how Anglo-American society operates to keep her family together, housed, and fed. Isaac Barbadoes, their eldest child, enlisted in the Continental Army from Woburn in 1777. From enlistment records, it appears that Isaac was not a Woburn resident, but likely a resident of Shrewsbury. He was part of the class of enlistees who were hired from time to time by Woburn to fill its quota or by private individuals to act as substitutes for them. Private Isaac Barbadoes enlisted in April 1777 and died a few months later on December 1st, 1777. Private Barbadoes served under Captain Edmund Monroe's company in Colonel Timothy Bigelow's regiment, the 15th Massachusetts Regiment. The 15th Massachusetts Regiment was raised on September 16, 1776, under Colonel Timothy Bigelow in Boston, Massachusetts, as part of Massachusetts' contribution to the resolve of 88 regiments. The regiment would see action at the Battle of Saratoga, the Battle of Monmouth, and the Battle of Rhode Island. Private Barbadoes died during the Battle of Saratoga. According to historian Charles Hudson, there was a legal document, a manumission, kept by his captain showing that he was a Negro legally discharged from his late master and that his mother was his legal heir. Cape Barbadoes would have kept the manumission papers for herself and her children to ensure freedom in a slave society where kidnapping and selling of Black people was known to occur. Perhaps she had a notary make a copy of Isaac's manumission certificate when he left home to enlist. Caden Kwok's youngest son, Abel, married Chloe Holloway of Hallwell, Maine, on September 27, 1782, at the First Baptist Church in Boston, Massachusetts. They had 9 children. The 1798 federal dwellings tax showed Abel and Chloe Barbadoes and their family living at the rear of 19 Belknap Street on the north slope of Beacon Hill. Abel Barbadoes was a member of the African Meeting House. He died in 1817 and is buried in Copp's Hill Burying Ground. Prince Hall, Isaac Barbadoes, Mary Augustus, Sarah Ritchie, and Margaret Colley are the names of the 5 Black Bostonians buried in Copp's Hill who have grave markers. No marker exists for Phyllis Wheatley, who is reportedly buried in Copp's Hill, nor for her husband, John Peters. It is estimated that more than 1,000 free, freed, and enslaved residents of the North End's New Guinea community, named for the West African nation where many of them, or their ancestors, had roots, were buried in the Copp's Hill Burying Ground. According to historian Dart Adams, New Guinea is believed to be not only Boston's first Black community, but also the first community of free Black people in the colonies. Yet during this entire period, a son of Lexington, a son of Cape Barbadoes, is one of only 5 with gravestones. Abel's first son was James Barbadoes. James operated a barbershop from 1821 to 1840 in Boston and kept a rooming house. He was also involved in the African Baptist Church and African Lodge number 459. This was a fraternal organization, and the Massachusetts General Colored Association. In 1831, Barbadoes was a delegate to the Convention of the People of Color in Philadelphia. This was the first national convention of African Americans. 2 years later, in 1833, he became one of the founders of the American Anti-Slavery Society, the second largest abolitionist organization in the United States. Barbados signed the organization's Declaration of Sentiments and served on its board of managers. Barbados was also a member of the New England Anti-Slavery Society. James Barbados was one of 3 Boston abolitionists who signed a letter welcoming William Lloyd Garrison home from England and asking him to come to a meeting of colored citizens who wanted to show their support for his efforts. James Barbados also fought for the freedom of free Black sailors who had been kidnapped and imprisoned in southern ports. One of those sailors was his brother, Robert H. Barbados, who was kidnapped in New Orleans and was jailed for 5 months before finally being freed. Like his grandmother, James Barbados valued family and freedom. We think of Lexington as birthplace of freedom. Maybe it is because so many of its residents, Black and white, sought freedom. Tonight, we recognize Kate Barbados, a daughter of Lexington, who sought freedom for herself, her husband, and her children. Kate's yearning for freedom was passed down to her children, and their children. Isaac sacrificed his life for freedom during the Revolutionary War, making Kate a Gold Star mother. Abel Barbados, Kate's youngest son, helped build the African Meeting House and a school for the neighborhood's African American children. His son James was active in the anti-slavery movement in Boston in the 1920s and the 1820s and the 1830s. James's son, Frederick, left Boston for California and then Washington, D.C. He emerged as an important figure in the struggle for equal rights in the second half of the 19th century. Generations of Barbados helped make our country more free and equal because of their matriarch, a woman named Kate, who persevered so that they could prosper. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in applauding the life and legacy of Kate Barbados, one of ABCL's 2024 Black History Portrait Banner honorees. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. And if you take a good look at the portrait, you may see a likeness between Martha and Kate. Those of you who've been following along this process, for some people, we just don't have a picture. But we have, for one lawyer, we had a lawyer. For a veteran, we had a veteran. And for someone from the islands, we have someone from the islands. So it's always good to think about that, right? You think about where people come from. How does it all work? My father talked about going back to Africa and seeing someone who looked just like his mother. Now, those of you who know me know that in my family, no one marries outside of Texas since 1860. So the genes are strong. And so, again, thank you, Martha, and thank you, everyone, for celebrating Kate, because we talk about the roots of democracy, and some of you are on the 250th, and you're thinking about that. And so here's someone who, without her, we would not have this country that we have today. And so now we move a century forward to John Henry Brown. And for John Henry Brown, we have Jason Camardi.
Need to adjust this a little. So John Henry Brown was born into slavery in Maryland on or around December 28th to Alonzo Brown and Lucinda Brooks in 1838. He self-emancipated in 1862 enlisted in the Navy on June 11th, 1862 during the Civil War. During that time, the Union Navy had approximately 22,000 individuals, or about 20% of its personnel, who were identified as African American. African American men were able to enlist in the Navy and receive pay and promotions similar to white sailors. During the Civil War, the Confiscation Act of 1861 allowed the Union to enlist African Americans and not enforce the Fugitive Slave Act. Instead, they could be employed on hospital ships and land infirmaries. John Henry Brown served on the USS Fernandina, a bark which was a sailing vessel with 3 or more masts. The Fernandina was commanded by acting volunteer Lieutenant J.W. Brown and reported for duty in the North Atlantic Blockading Squadron at Hampton Roads, Virginia, on the 2nd of December, 1861. On the 11th of June, 1862, the Fernandina was reassigned to the South Atlantic Blockading Squadron, which joined near Charleston, South Carolina. Aside from the summer of 1863, when she sailed north for repairs, that particular bark vessel blockaded at St. Simons, Georgia, and at St. Catharines, Georgia, and at Ossabaw Sound. She captured the vessel, the sloop Annie Thompson, on the 16th of January, 1864, after the blockade runner had grounded. John Henry Brown himself was honorably discharged on the 9th of June, 1865. Not long afterwards, he made his way to New England and settled in Lexington, Massachusetts. He became a member of the Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR, in Massachusetts, whose purpose was to preserve the history and the influence the remembrance of the Civil War. You see it by the distinct emblem upon his hat here on the banner. The GAR was a veteran association founded in 1869, composed solely of soldiers who had fought for the Union during the Civil War and had been honorably discharged. George Meade, post number 119 of the Grand Army of the Republic, was responsible for Memorial Day activities in Lexington. Each year, during town meetings, funds were appropriated for this purpose. Mr. Brown was a post-level officer. Prior to his death, he had been reelected as a junior vice post commander surgeon of that post. At the age of 29, Mr. Brown married 21-year-old Sarah M. Stamps on the 29th of June, 1871, here in Lexington. Her family originally hailed from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Mr. Brown's solicited occupation was a day laborer, and records also indicated that he and both Mrs. Brown could read and write. They had a daughter as well, Helen Brown, who was born to them in Rhode Island in 1899. Mr. Brown's home was located here behind Cary Hall at 9 Sherman Street in Lexington. Mr. Brown literally helped lay the foundations of Lexington, where he worked as an engineer of the stone crusher at the corner of Waltham Street and State Road. He's photographed, as you can see here, with William Ham in 1898 during construction of the Merritt Road, also known as Route 2A, where they were drilling a ledge. After years of work with the Highway Department, he retired with a pension. Around that time, in 1892, the congregation of Hancock United Church of Christ began to erect a new building at its current location, which we're familiar with on Massachusetts Avenue, next to the Lexington Battle Ring. The structure was dedicated in 1899, and John Brown subsequently became a member and took the position of sexton for the church. In that capacity, he would have served as a trusted caretaker for the facility and the surrounding grounds. According to Commonwealth records, after having been a resident of Lexington for about 60 years, John Henry Brown passed away on the 13th of December, 1920, as his residence on Sherman Street at the age of 81. Mr. Brown was buried at Monroe Cemetery. His funeral was officiated by 2 clergymen, the Reverend Christopher Walter Collier of Hancock Congregation Church, and Reverend Walter D. McLean, the rector of St. Bartholomew Episcopal Church in Cambridge. Mr. Brown's GAR comrades were his pallbearers, and they included Selectman William B. Foster, Town Treasurer George D. Harrington, Post Captain Charles G. Kaufman, and Everett S. Long. 8 years after his passing, his wife, Sarah Brown, was buried in the family plot. So again, I would like to recognize and introduce you to John Henry Brown. Thank you for your attention and time, and I'd also like to thank Sean Osborne of ABCL, whose significant research contributed to these presentations.
John Henry Brown, an engineer, not a civil engineer, but an engineer. Exactly. Civil engineer says, yes, thank you. Ledge, rock crushing. We talk about people who build a community. Many of you are pillars of this community. This man and his colleagues built that community. Does anybody recognize where this is on Merritt Road? Right? That's the beauty of what the folks who built this community have done. They took this and created what we now have. And that's the beauty of John Henry Brown and his colleagues and his peers. And for those of you who may have noticed what Jason was talking about, so many of them were veterans. Right? So when you think about why is it important to think about service, that's why. You think about how do we move forward. It's amazing to me when you look at the pictures from the Worthing Connect collection on John Henry Brown. You see John Henry Brown and his wife at Plum Island at a picnic with the rest of the folks in the GAR. Right? In a war about slavery. Some folks in Lexington got it right in terms of fraternal organizations, GAR, and higher voting practices with the highway department in the 1800s. So when we think about what's our vision for the 21st century, think about this John Henry Brown experience. Think about when you say, oh, a self-emancipated person from the 1860s from Maryland. Where will he end up? No one thinks this, right? No one thought that. Did anyone think this? No, right? Neither did I. Right? Do you see him with a pension, 1920? In downtown Lexington? No. The pallbearers he had? No. Right? That's the possibility then that should be a possibility now. So with that, your homework for the year. This is not an exercise on extending Black History Month. This is an exercise on extending your ideas about Black history. So of course, we have now 29 banner honorees. I'm going to go through some of them that I want you to think about over the next month. And I urge you, and by the way, that's them opening up the cake for you for after. Yes, that's the cake for after. My dog bought the plan makes me stay. I've listed some people that I thought of and some events that I thought of over the next 12 months. I urge you to reach out to me and say, hey, what about this banner honoree and this holiday or this event? Okay, that's part of your homework. So of course, we have in a few weeks MLK Day and we have MLK in the banner. In February, the 28 days, the 29 banner honorees, that's your homework for every day. It's a leap year?
Yeah. 29 days.
Yeah. Thank you, teacher. I think that's why she's here. All right, 29 days of the year, just in time. See, 2 more. So you're 29, you're all set. Every day you study banner honoree. Then, of course, you're all looking forward to National Engineers Week. But now you can, right? You got Patty there for that as well. Women's History Month. You have it's almost half of the 29 are women. In April, Alan Dawson, Lexington's favorite jazz musician. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. And of course, Silas Purdue, representing so many of the Black Patriots of April 19th. And then in May, got Dr. Jemison. And then, DGW Day. What's the date?
I don't have the date, it's in May.
It's in May. Any announcement? John Henry will be there, right?
We'll try.
We're going to try to have John Henry there for DGW Day. If not, think hard. So say it again.
The banner will be there.
The banner will be there, yes. And go to the Worthen collection and look at those pictures. I mean, that is, it is just so beautiful to see that. And then, Randall Taylor Woods for the Inventors Month. Juneteenth, there are so many people, literally, and there's so many banner honorees that made the occupation of Texas on June 19, 1865 possible. They include our 2 veterans from the 54th. Two veterans from the Civil War, rather. John Henry and Eli George Biddle, Frederick Douglass, and Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, who made the 54th possible. And of course, in July, we have Walker Day, and then the other inventor, because inventors are really good about making sure they're monster everywhere. You notice that? Come again, and we have William Childs Curtis. September, October, I couldn't think of anything, but that's your job, right? November, we have Paul Cuffey. His mother was Native American. And for Veterans Day, John Henry Brown, Silas Purdue, Eli George Biddle, Edward Rowe III, Alan Dawson, and Bill Ridgely Sr., who passed earlier, and so many of you saw his memorial at the town meeting. And then December, your last homework. So everybody got that? That's paper? Okay, good. And so with that, I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Tiffany Payne. Tiffany? For a second year in a row as part of the Pick Up crew. And all of our other volunteers you see wandering around, you saw some of us setting up earlier for making this possible. Could not have made this happen without all of them. And of course, Fallen Church. Fallen Church has been a partner with us with the MLK Day concert, which I invite you all to come to a week from Sunday. And also they decided this year that they would support one of the banners. So again, thank you, Fallen Church. Again, I want to thank all of you. When we think about what we do in ABCL, and for those of you who are professional historians, public historians, or wandering through historians, you know how hard it is to get anyone to sit still to talk about history for 5 minutes. And yet here you are. So thank you, thank you, thank you. A few more announcements. On the back, there's a Black Business Directory. Those of you interested, it'll be on the website soon. Not yet. Also, the cake is from a new vendor. And what's great about this work we do with ABCL is her story. So she is the mother of a Metco student from the class of 99 Lexington High School. Was found through Facebook through Tiffany with no idea that this was a Lexington thing that was happening. She was surprised when I met her earlier today when I said, 99? Does your daughter know Nicole? I don't know. Because who knows who your children's friends are, right? And she did. Again, this is the beauty of community in these events. So enjoy the cake, give us your feedback, and if you like it, buy more from Ms. Cakes. If you don't like it, let me know.
Why is this important to me? I think it's important to everybody in Lexington. We can't really think about our future if we don't know our past. And it's really wonderful that ABCL and Sean have really, particularly Sean, have brought this to life.
I'm very thrilled that Sean had approached me to be part of this project, the Black History Project of Lexington. When my kids were going through schools here in Lexington, in elementary schools, they would do like these colonial studies, and they would have these times where students could pick a role, some colonial figure that they could be. And there was never really a Black person that my child could choose to be. And so with this project, I think it provides more options for kids of color, where they can choose someone of color that they can associate with, that has a rich history that they can connect with. And so I appreciate the fact that ABCL has put a lot of effort into this. I especially like Kate Barbadoes' story because, like a mother, I'm a mother, I've got 3 kids. She was a mother of 3 kids, fighting really hard to raise her children and save their lives and provide for them. And so she has left them an amazing legacy. And I think she makes a great role model. So I'm honored that I had the opportunity to share her story with everyone. So thank you.
This is a great event. It was so good to be able to share the stories of Kate Barbadoes and John Henry Brown with the hundreds of folks who were here tonight. The volunteers were great. But going back to our honorees, their lives were unique in that we celebrate them. They're extraordinary in so many different ways. And so I hope that when people watch the program or do their own research on them, that they will see things that we missed and then share them with their friends and then share them back with us, because that's how we all grow in our knowledge and appreciation of this history. And really excited by the ideas that people have already shared with me about what we should be doing next, different ways that people that they know or know of can be celebrated. So hopefully all of us will be thinking about different ways to celebrate and honor Black excellence every month throughout 2024 and beyond.